Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inshallah, in this video, we are going to complete about specific immunity. In the last video, we have learned about humoral immunity, and we said that humoral immunity it's a style of immunity that goes on in blood and in body fluids, and the B lymphocytes are the cells responsible for humoral immunity. Let's revise quickly about that. This is a B cell. This is the B cell, okay, and this is the yellow shaped parts here. These are proteins called antibodies, and this is the antigen. This is the pathogen. So the pathogen by its or the antigen like it sticks to the antibody in specific sites. Okay, whenever it is this complex occurs, antigen binds to the antibodies. Helper T cells, a type of T lymphocytes, activate B cells to do what? It activates B cells to grow more and more and divide more and more rapidly. Of course, when they are dividing more rapidly, more antibodies are formed. What happens next? The B cells, after being dividing rapidly, they produce two types of cells, plasma cells and memory cells. What is the function of B cells? Plasma cells. Plasma cells release more and more antibodies that capture antigens and mark them for destruction. They capture them and tag, as we said, that the antibodies they tag the antigens for other cells of the immunity to come and destroy them. And for the memory cell here, what they do, the memory cells remembers the antigen, so whenever it comes again to the body more quickly, immunity response will be done. That this we call it a secondary response, and the first response here, or the first time that the antigen entered our body and the immunity worked on it, this is the primary response. Let's start with the after we have revised about humoral immunity, let's see about the cell-mediated immunity. As I have gave you a hint about before, that the T lymphocytes, these are the cells, or these are the the cells that responsible for the cell mediated immunity. So whenever a macrophage is one of the immune cells, consumes or attacks the virus and displays antigen on its surface, the helper T cells bind macrophages and are activated. What does that mean? This is the virus here, and then the macrophage here, it ingests, or it like consumes or eats the virus. This complex, it's like activate helper, a type of cell called helper T cell. It's a T lymphocyte. It's called the helper T cells. What happens when the helper T cells divide, activated, like what happened to the B cells? It's activated and it divides more and more. We have more and more of the T helper cell. Okay, then the helper T cells, here the B cells, when they were divided, they produce two types of cells, plasma cells and memory cells. Here the helper T cells will produce two types of cells too, cytotoxic T cells, and memory cells. Cytotoxic T cell and memory cells. So whenever the activated helper T cells divide, they produce cytotoxic T cells and memory cells. And it has a third function here, that it activates the B cells here. Activates also more and more, activates the B cells here to produce more antibodies, more plasma cells, more memory B cells. Now, what is the function of the cytotoxic cells? The cytotoxic cells bind to the infected body cells. This is an infected body cell and destroy them. And the memory T cells act as the B memory cells. It reminds the body whenever the same antigen comes back again. It responds more quickly than helper T cells in the primary response. It makes a more the secondary response. In the second time the antigen come to our body, the second response of the immune system by the help of memory B cells and memory T cells, it will be faster than first. Going to the next page, Okay, we are going to speak about the cell mediated immunity again, like to summarize it. The cell mediated immunity, it is another part of the immune response. It depends upon macrophages and T cells, and we call it the cell mediated immunity because as I have mentioned before, it responds to the infected cells, not antigens moving in the blood like or influence like the humoral immunity. Okay, this type of immune system, the cell mediated immunity, defend the body against some viruses, fungi, and single-celled pathogens that they are doing their dirty work inside our body cells. Whenever this antigen, comes into our body cells, it can destroy the cell, it can release toxins, it can interfere with the homeostasis of our body. T cells also protect the body from its own cells if they become cancerous. One of the function of the T cells that when some of our cells or some of the body cells turns to be cancerous, the T cells protect that or kill these cancerous cells. So we have an immunity against cancer to a certain limit. Okay, then when a cell is infected by a pathogen and it is tagged, you remember when it is tagged by the B cells or by the antibodies, or when the macrophages eats or consume the pathogen, what happens that the T cells will be activated. The T cells will be activated. The cell displays a portion. Displays, it means it destructs like a portion of the antigen on the outer surface of its membrane, or it's not like destruct, maybe it's like it makes its antigen to put the antigen clear for the other cells, to put the part of the antigen or portion of the antigen on the outer surface of its membrane, so to be denoted or to be recognized by other cells. So whenever the cell is infected by a pathogen, the cell displays a portion of the antigen on the outer surface of its membrane. Its here refers to the cell, the infected cell, and this acts as a signal for any circulating T cells, which is called helper T cells, as we have mentioned before. And then the activated helper T cells divided more and more to give T cells, if you remember the image, and then also it activates B cells, it activates the cytotoxic cells and produce memory T cells. The cytotoxic T cells hunt down body cells infected with a particular antigen and kill the cell. Okay, and the memory helper T cell enables the immune system to respond quickly if there is the same pathogen enters again to the body. We have something called another type of immunity cells called suppressor T cells. If you have heard about it before, it inhibits what its function? It inhibits the immune response once an infection is controlled. خلاص, infection, when a pathogen came and the infection was controlled, خلاص, these suppressor T cells, they suppress the immune system. They suppress the immune system to prevent the immune system from attacking our own cells or producing autoimmune disease. But there is here we want to say about cytotoxic cells as they are helpful in the immune system. As you have seen, they kill down the infected cells, but they play an important role, or they have some problem when a person have an organ transplant. So whenever a person having an organ transplant, these cytotoxic cells interfere or make the acceptance of the organ transplant difficult. Why? Because of course the immune system would recognize this organ coming out, or the transplant coming out from outside, will recognize this as non-self, will recognize it as other. So the T cells would damage this transplanted organ. So what is how do we can avoid that? By to select a donor that have cell markers that are nearly identical to the cell markers of the recipient, and also the recipient has to take drugs to suppress cell-mediated immunity for life.